This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Clicks. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is February 8th, 2024, and I've got the magnificent Crackberry Kevin here, and Michael Fisher. Hi, guys. How's it going?
Miriam, nice to be here. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. You folks are with Clicks. I don't have you as guests for once. I have you on because you this incredibly cool product called Clicks that you launched at CES. I mean, I'm biased because I love it. I love the idea. I think it's such a brilliant product, and I kind of would have picked it as my best of CS or something. I have to say Rabbit is also another one that I thought was cool.
Rabbit's very cool.
You guys nailed it. So I want to chat with you for like 10, 15 minutes about this, find out a little more about the product. Maybe you can talk us through, how did this come about? Like in retrospect, it seems so obvious that you would make this
buttons on an
product.
iPhone is obvious. I don't know if real buttons on an iPhone is obvious.
Is that the word?
No, but like once you see your pitch, it's like, okay,
Right.
that makes 100% sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I don't understand is you see an iPad that's a touchscreen, and then sometimes people put a keyboard on an iPad, and there's a keyboard on an iPad, and nobody looks twice at it. Yet, if you take an iPhone that's just a smaller iPad, and you put a keyboard on it, poof, spreads like wildfire across the planet. Like it's kind of amazing to see what's happened in the response to it. But it also surprises me that it's such a big hot topic.
Yeah, I think the moment you see the product, either a render or you see it in person or whatever, you see Clicks on the iPhone, people treat it rightfully as an integrated thing. And they kind of forget, like it falls out of 95% of people's brains that you can take the iPhone out of Clicks if you want to. But, and I will, as we'll get into it in a little bit, I think that there's there's also a lot of functionality that remains without you having to remove it, which is great. But Kevin, do you want to talk about how this got started? And I'll come in when I entered the scene.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a story that's 15 years in the making with the crew of people who had to come together with our various backgrounds and everything.
Yeah.
Obviously, BlackBerry fanboy number one for a decade plus. Mr. Mobile, probably the most vocal remaining fan of buttons on the interwebs.
Mm-hmm.
But really, I'd say it was Lang Chen from the FX Tech team. If you know him, Miriam, I think
I do.
You guys go way back, right?
Yeah.
And he built this device, which is in my hand for your Patreon supporters.
Yeah, so I actually advise them on this product. So, disclaimer to everyone. So, I'm very.
I always forget that.
A little bit about that, yes.
So Lang Chen is like, without him, he's the last believer in buttons who could actually build a product, right? And after they did this phone in, what year? 2018, 2019, a slider device with a full physical keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
He was working on ideas around what an iteration of that product could look like. And just conceptual, lots of ideas, nothing got built. But one of the concepts was let's call it a rough drawing of what ultimately is, I think, that Clicks form factor. And it was over a year ago where I saw that drawing, and I knew the FX Tech crew, and a mutual friend kind of reconnected us, Jonathan Young. And he's like, Kevin, I got to show you something. Lang Chen wants me to show it to you. And I saw this image, and in my head, I just went through several minutes of, what year is it? How long has it been since there's been something with buttons on it that we could actually buy? I'm like, wait, BlackBerry's out of the game. They're like selling their patents off. This
Wait,
is a
you're not
different
counting
world we're living
unihertz?
in. I got that principle thing. If I don't have something good to say, I'm just gonna.
Yeah.
So there's this notion of it's been a long time, and I kind of said, why doesn't this exist? And it became very clear that if this product's going to exist, I think we're the people on the planet who have to actually bring it to market. And from that point, we went into, refining a drawing into building a 3D printed prototype, which for your Patreon supporters, I have it in my hand right here.
Yeah, folks, check it out.
The moment I got this in my hand, something kind of magical happened.
That's because it's you, Kevin. Of course, something magical
Here's
would
the
happen.
magical thing. I thought my fear of seeing the drawing was it was going to be long and maybe top heavy.
Right.
And if you think about how old school BlackBerry users grip a phone with buttons, we used to grip it in that BlackBerry prayer position where you hold it at the bottom.
Yep.
And if you did that, maybe that would be the case. But when I got this 3D printed model and I just grabbed it without thinking, my pinky went below it, held it in that sort of cradle position, just like I would any big touchscreen slab. And I'm like, holy smokes, enough time has gone by in the world without buttons, and we've all used big devices long enough that my instinct is not to grab it at the bottom, but to grab it like I would an iPhone. And at that moment in time, I was like, this is going to work. Like, this is it.
For what it's worth, we've given this thing, we're probably given 400 demos at this point. We've shown it to hundreds of people, and I would say about 90% of them just do that immediate thing that you just talked about. They grab it like a regular phone, because it rests in your hand like a regular phone does. And only after a few minutes do they say, oh, I guess I kind of thought this should be a lot more awkward.
Yeah. To me, it just proves that I've been wrong all along about the Z Fold form factor from Samsung. I always panned them for being tall and skinny, but really, you guys just scaled it up a notch with a keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
It works.
Maybe the next phone should be really that big. A lot of people actually have complained about that. They're like, it makes the phone so big, to which Kevin says, you can remove it.
You can remove it, or you can go, if you want it bigger, you can get a Pro Max and put a Clicks on it.
That's what I'm going to do, just so you know, because don't mess about.
The final story, though, is once we got this 3D printed version in the hands, it was like, oh, this is going from being a project where we're, testing if this is even a good concept that could work, to I think this has legs. And I called up Michael immediately, and it was like, Michael, we got something cooking here. The only way we're doing this is if you're part of it, because it was very clear, if you're going to go to market with something like this in 2024, there's only one way to do it right. And I think it's what we just did the last couple of weeks.
Well, my favorite part about this was my absolute lack of any kind of forward thinking or big picture thinking, because Kevin shows me this thing. He's like, I'm going to kill you if you show this to anybody. You cannot do that. I'm like, okay, I got it. And he sends me this render. I'm at my local coffee shop and I look at this thing and I'm like, oh my God, you crazy bastards. And I said, Mr. Mobile needs the exclusive on this. That's all I wanted. I was like, I just want to be the first one to do a video on this. You owe this to me as a friend. And what happened in very short order was we were talking about this thing, I don't know, twice a week and then 4 times a week. Yeah. And then suddenly we were just always talking about that. And it was like, Kevin, to be honest, I don't remember whether it was you or me, but it became very obvious rather quickly. It's like, hey, I have a lot of feedback and I want to come on board and help define this thing. And that's basically what we've been doing since then, is just me doing what I do best, is staying close to the product and being like, should the apostrophe be here? And Kevin, let's talk about this stamped leather on the, all this kind of stuff. And you've been doing your genius business. And
now look at you. You're an entrepreneur. Now you're going to be a billionaire, and you're going to understand how you're going to understand what it feels like to live in San Francisco or something.
Yeah, I hear the rents are coming down below Brooklyn finally.
You're going to be one of those bros very soon. Watch out. I'm just kidding. But seriously, guys, I'm so excited about this. As somebody who has been part of companies myself and has worked in the kind of startup world, it's always so much fun, right?
It is.
And my take is that I mentioned this on the original podcast, the CS podcast. Me and Adam Dowd did it, and we were like it's like 1 a.m. after the crazy Narav party, and we're just like losing our minds. And I'm like, I think I had the most eloquent little thing about clicks. To me, it's like everything about clicks. And it's the way, and I'm not just talking about the product, but all the little details. It's like you guys just nailed it. Like the marketing is right, the PR is right, the product is right, the launch was right. And that in part makes me very delighted because I've got that entrepreneurial thing going on. But if you look at the product itself, for me, what really makes it is, as I was telling you earlier, I am not a keyboard person. I appreciate the phones with keyboards because I know there's an audience out there of people who appreciate them. And I, believe in, we all have our personal preferences. I just type fast on glass now, but I love the idea that I can then put my Pro Max in this thing. And when I edit a reel or something, I have all the space. The keyboard is not taking a third of my space. And I'm totally fine with typing on a keyboard at that point.
More than a third. It's like 48%.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's almost half.
Yeah. It's almost half
more
now.
than a third. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. So that's to me what, like, I get the question often from my audience, like they're very polarized. It's like, why would you want that? And the other one is like, oh my God, it's like the best thing since sliced bread, right? And so I feel like I'm a good example of the middle ground. Like I love it because I'm going to find a use for it. And I can always remove it if it's too big. But also, I have big pockets and I love big things. So I'm like, I want now a phone to be the size of a Pro Max with a keyboard attached. But at the same time, I'm also wondering, will you make a case without the keyboard that's branded Clicks that matches? Because I'd love to have the option, like when you remove it from the case, your phone is no longer protected, right? So that's like kind of weird because now you don't have the keyboard. So do you do it or don't you do it, right?
Our PR guy said, I cannot comment on rumors and
future
speculation.
Yeah, right. We've got boilerplate for that.
Anyway, just planting some seeds, you could sell it as a bundle, buy one, get one. Just an idea.
Yeah,
because
I don't know.
Also, that case has an aesthetic. That case has an aesthetic that I think nobody else really has.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of runway for us to experiment more with that. I mean, there's a lot more that I personally would love to do on the design front for the case portion, even though we don't call it a case. But I'll say this, like, I think going back to your earlier thing about like, who would want this? I think there's this weird thing that happens in the brains of all of us when a product launches and it becomes polarizing because there's this weird assumption that it's like, oh, they want everyone to buy one of these for their iPhone. It's like, no, we understood that this was going to appeal to a specific kind of customer. And my thing is like everybody immediately goes to oh, okay, well, the people who never got over BlackBerry. Yes, absolutely, for sure, that they're going to buy it and they're going to love it. But my favorite demos to give at CES were to people who never had a physical
and
QWERTY
they realized
smartphone.
How awesome it was, right?
Yeah, but they still take that 2 minutes of being like, I don't know. And then you show them what you were just talking about. You show them like, hey, check it out. Look what happens when you pop up the virtual keyboard. And they're like, oh yeah, I do hate that. Oh wow, so you're just saying I can type on this and I can just have all of my Instagram reel or my Instagram live or my giant group chat with the message history. And it's like, that's what made it click for everyone. And, Kevin could probably talk about the shortcuts and stuff, but like, that was to me the most universal, oh, wow, light bulb goes on moment with everyone, young or old. Oh my God, right. I'm not sacrificing all that screen space. So that was the delight for me.
Yeah. So I personally, felt that instantly because I've used a BlackBerry before. And of course, I do create content I use my iPhone primarily for video content, for Reels and stuff. So I'm like, absolutely, I need it. But I think for some people, I still think it's confusing because they're like, it's an iPhone. The whole premise of the iPhone, Steve Jobs told us, you don't want a keyboard, right? But also, I think it's very savvy of you guys because there's like probably more iPhones out there than anything else, right? Like, I mean, especially in North America, especially in the markets that where we're based, like you have, even if you get a slice of that, like say you get like 2% of that market buys a Clicks, right? Like, oh my God, like, can you imagine 2%, right?
2%'s a massive company.
I know, so, but I'm just saying, imagine, 1%, let's just go 1%. 1% buys it.
Huge.
It's like, we're talking millions of clicks, right?
You're exactly right. Like when we built out the business case around it, number one, it's an accessory, right? That means by definition, we're not building for the 99%. That's Apple's job. That's Samsung's job. That's everybody else's job, right? Accessory companies are there to fill in the specialist needs of the people who want special products for specific purposes. And I think that's why it is an accessory. But, we kind of looked at it as, is this for 1 in 10 iPhone users? Probably not. Is it for 1 in 100? I'm like, maybe not. But is it for 1 in 250, 1 in 500? I'm like, yep, possibly. 1 in 1,000, absolutely, right?
I was going to say 1 in 1,000.
1 in 1,000 is a no-brainer. And that was, I'd say, the business case and the rationale in the beginning. And what you don't know when you have an idea like Clicks is good ideas and bad ideas, they kind of look almost the same until the moment of truth when you put the idea out there and you find out if it was a bad idea or a good idea.
Yeah.
And we thought that 1 in 1,000 was a very rational, probably sober estimate. And what we've seen since we've launched is we were way under on that estimate. The market for Clicks is actually a lot bigger. And we've seen it through pre-order sales. We've seen it through the distributor, retailer interest, the government interest, the corporate interest. Like there is an unmet demand that's been lying there nascent for a long time because there hasn't been anything. And the biggest thing is if there has been a keyboard, that's always had a compromise called, I have to give up my iPhone for it. And this is sort of your no compromise solution to get buttons back in the world. And I think it's an accessory, just like that keyboard on an iPad. It's not weird to look at. And I think my hope here is that, the excitement over clicks is there for a while, but eventually we just see it and we don't think about it, because that's
Right.
really the ultimate goal. Is this should be an option for decades to come, not months and not years. It should just be like, if you want buttons, here's buttons on your smartphone. Take them off, leave them. It's not for everyone, but the people who love it are going to love it a lot, and they're going to really appreciate that it exists.
It's nice to see that demand reflected in inbound messages, because of course we've got a lot of smart people. We've got a lot of data. You can look at it and like, I'm used to, I do YouTube, right? And Miriam, this, you look at your analytics, you see what the computers tell you, but it's a totally different thing to get an email addressed to you or Kevin or whoever, and to have them say, oh my God, thank you. I've been waiting for this for 10 years. And Kevin, I know you've been getting those emails, but I haven't. Like, you've been getting them for 10 years. I haven't. And to have them roll in after the launch of Clicks and be like, thank God I ordered one. I can't wait to meet you guys. What a wonderful, what a heartwarming, strange thing that is.
My complaint box stopped. Like, for the last 10 years, I'm the complaint box on planet Earth for when's there a new phone with buttons coming out? Is there a new BlackBerry? Can I get buttons? What can you do about buttons? So for me, this was like half of my involvement in Clicks was so that the emails would stop coming complaining to me about lack of. So I had some unique insight to the demand, I think.
One last question. This is more of a business question. Like, I am confident you guys are going to do well with this. It's going to be niche, but you're going to do well. But, there's a lot of naysayers out there, and a lot of people are pointing out all the other attempts, right? There's been like, Typo and Fizzable and a bunch of others. So what do you tell those jerks?
No, they're not jerks. Like, it's a worthwhile thing to say. And Kevin has a great answer that I want him to give with regard to one of those specifically, but I'll just say succinctly, hopefully. We built what Kevin calls a dream team, and part of that involved getting the right people in place to have a great design that was well thought out and executed well as well. So for me, I've used those other products, and I'm not going to throw stones here, but like, ours is the best iPhone keyboard that has ever been produced by far. And I'm not the only one to have said that. I mean, yes,
that to me is what, things like the Lightning one has a Lightning port at the bottom, right?
Yeah, for
not some kind of janky thing.
It's not Bluetooth. You're not worried about strange connection
like
issues.
It makes sense. You're not messing about. That's what I'm talking about.
But Kevin, you have a broader answer about how that earlier product was trying to solve a different problem, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think part of it's always timing too. And the difference with, say, Typo is that was 10 years ago, and we were in a different era. And what Typo was solving for was not what Clicks is doing, where it's actually a product for iPhone users. Typo was a solution for BlackBerry users who lots of people love their BlackBerry, and BlackBerry was not keeping up with the demands of their customers. The BlackBerry didn't have the apps. It didn't have the camera. So what were people doing? Also buying an iPhone. And it was a two-phone problem that Typo solved for. And I was one of these people. I had a BlackBerry in one hand, in one pocket, and an iPhone in another. And what they said was, hey, if we can kind of turn our iPhone into a BlackBerry, we can go back to having one device in our pocket. So it was really a BlackBerry issue that Typo was building for, not that. And then, they made some product choices that compromised the iPhone experience. For example, that iPhone had, it was much smaller, so it was a much smaller keyboard, but also had the home button at the bottom. So the keyboard was covering the home button, immediately compromising the iOS iPhone experience. It got remapped to another button. It was Bluetooth, which was laggier. It had a battery that you charged separately. And they made it look like a BlackBerry, which got them removed from the market, even though there was actually a lot of demand for the product in its form. What we've done now is that's all gone from the world. This is a product for the iPhone, built for iPhone users, built for people who want buttons. And it actually extends what you can do with an iPhone. And part of that is things like shortcuts, which are now baked into iOS, which weren't there 10 years ago.
Yeah, so exactly.
This is it's like the iPhone's been waiting for an accessory like this to exist. And then you look at something like the new Journal app, and I'm like, journaling on a touchscreen's weird. Journaling with buttons is awesome.
It's awesome.
There's this mental shift.
But the other thing that I think is important as we wrap up here is basically, I feel like, 15 years have elapsed since the original iPhone, right? And in that time,
17,
whatever it is, like BlackBerry just faded, and then now there's room for a comeback because the products have evolved, and people are no longer going to necessarily look at this as a BlackBerry thing, in my opinion. You're going to get an entire generation of people who be like, I don't think of this as a BlackBerry kind of product or for BlackBerry user product. It's
Right.
just a clever accessory for the iPhone. And I think you couldn't do that 5 years ago,
You
right?
just nailed
There's
it.
still
You
enough of
nailed it.
that kind of dragging on attachment to the BlackBerry universe from back then,
You
right?
just nailed it. The headlines for the first 48 hours after Clicks came to the world all referred to BlackBerry, and within 72 hours, the BlackBerry references already dropped, and it just became an iPhone accessory, which is perfect, right? Like
Exactly.
that's great.
Well, on that note, look, we could go on. I'd love to have you on again at some point. We can dive into details like how did Clicks come up as a name and stuff like that. But right now we got to wrap up. Thanks so much, the two of you, for being on the show. I really appreciate
Having
it.
us.
I hope
Thank
that
you,
it
Miriam.
gives some good insights to the audience. And folks, we'll be right back with the news. And folks, we're back with Frank. How are you doing, Frank? How's life treating you?
I'm doing well, Miriam. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast today. I'm so excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, I just had the folks from Clicks on, and we talked about their product, how it came to be, which is really interesting, right? But, I can't help but feel that even a week into it now, we need to talk about Apple Vision Pro some more.
We need to. It's been all over the news. It's been all over social media. It's such an incredible device. I've been using it since Friday now.
Wow.
And it's been really exciting. I have some thoughts about it. Some things I like, some things I don't. So yeah.
Yeah. So folks, in case you don't know, Frank McShan, TikTok, YouTube, Insta, right?
Yes.
So, last week Parker came on the show. It's kind of coincidental that I have two awesome TikTokers in a row. I've also had Miles on before that. So you guys, I love how, we have all these generations of creators that are kind of coming on. I've had people that are started out like me blogging, people that are YouTube creators. Now we've got the TikTok generation. I think it's super cool to see how everybody's doing their thing. And so, we talked about it, but it was hypothetical, right? Because Parker didn't have a Vision Pro. I don't have a Vision Pro. I'm kind of, of the thought that I wanted to become more, second or third gen before I jump ship. But I got to live vicariously through all my other friends who thankfully have an ability to get it through Apple or through their, sponsoring budgets or whatever. So I saw that, as you said, you've been using it and you did some videos, and I kind of want to get it from your perspective. Like, how did you feel about this before you went into it? And how do you feel about it now? Like, for me, it's been a mixed bag in the sense that I've had always struggles with, I know this is not a VR headset, but with that concept of a VR headset, something that encloses your face.
Right.
Because of the fact that I wear glasses and, my prescription's really weird and, I'm a kind of get sweaty and hot and, fogged up, and it's never been a super great experience for me. So the form factor is the issue for me. It's not the idea of what it can do. Like, I'm on board on the AR stuff. So did you come into it like that yourself, or did you already have a bunch of VR headsets and you're like, this is going to be a cakewalk. I'm into this already.
So I've used a couple of VR headsets before. I've used the Meta Quest 3. And then I also had 2 demos of Vision Pro before release. So I did try it right after WWDC when it was announced. That was just incredible because I had really no idea what to expect because we had just seen, a few minutes in the keynote. And when I tried it on for the first time, I was totally blown away because just all of the different features, they did I'm sure you've seen the dinosaur encounter video. A lot of people have talked about. So they did that in the first demo, and just having, holding your hand out and the butterfly would land right on your finger and it would stay on your finger as you're moving around. I was like, this is crazy. So I kind of dwelled on it for a few months. And then earlier in January, I had a demo in New York, a Vision Pro again. And that demo was also incredible because we got to explore some more of the features. We were looking in photos, viewing immersive video, and I was honestly just blown away because when you have that immersion level turned all the way up, you're essentially feeling like you're in a different world because you can still see your hands, but like I was standing on top of a volcano, so I was a little nervous to even walk around because I might trip. So
I heard about that crazy volcano demo. That sounds something insane.
Yeah, so it is a first gen product, so I was expecting to encounter some bugs. When I first set it up, I had to redo my persona a couple of times. The first time I did it, my face was a little bit lopsided, so I was like, I think I did something wrong here. So I rescanned my face, and my persona looked a little bit better. I don't think it's like 100%, the way I'd like it to be. I feel like I still look a little like, I don't know. I feel like I have
Uncanny Valley. I think everybody does,
Valley.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think clearly, like, can we agree this is an area that Apple is, and I'm sure they're 100% aware of this, needs to like figure out a more polished experience somehow, right?
Yes. And it's important to note that personas are still in beta, so I think they'll improve over time. But for right now, I think like scanning, I just myself and a couple of my friends as well had to rescan our faces a couple of times to kind of get a good, somewhat accurate representation of what we looked like. So
cool. Well, listen, I'm assuming you correct me, but you got your review unit from Apple, yeah?
I actually bought one on Friday.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yes.
I wasn't sure. So, okay. So, what's interesting to me when you talk here is that you like the immersive stuff, but it seems to me that Apple's really talking this up as an AR experience. They call it spatial computing, right? So my question is, it seems to me like the immersion part, like the watching a movie in 4K 3D HDR, which is going to be amazing. Like to me, that alone is a really good use case. Like I get it, but do I need to spend $3,500 for that? Those displays are absolutely state of the art, right? That's part of the experience.
Right.
But I feel like we could get that with $1,000 device if we didn't have to deal with the eyesight part, if we didn't have to deal with aluminum, carbon fiber, magnesium. Right. And like, I am on board. Like as an engineer, all these materials ring a bell as the right choices, but also immediately bring the price point up. So to me, it seems that right now Apple's delivering like a whole bunch of different experiences that are not necessarily what I imagine the end game of this product, which is these Celine glasses that you just put on, and all of a sudden you get all these 37 displays that you put all over your house, right? But of course, you can't get VR, like you can't get that immersion because you have normal outside lights. So maybe you can wear like little things like you see people that are older that like try to shelter themselves from the sun by putting these little side things on their glasses. Maybe you can like magnetically clip these things on, and it kind of occludes most of the outside. I don't know how it's going to work going forward, but that's kind of where I think they want to go. So in that context, to me, the immersive part is not the most important part. To me, what seems to be the more important part is that spatial computing part, right?
Yes, no, for sure. Because the fact that you can have, 10 different windows open, you can be browsing on Safari, have a little Apple Music window pinned on your wall, have your emails, notes open. And as you move around in the space, the windows all stay there. Like I could even leave the room, and then when I come back, the windows are exactly where I left them and have not moved at all. So that also kind of like got me when I tried it for the first time. I was like, this is crazy. Like, how does it know that to where to kind of leave each window? So I agree with you on the immersion side as well, because I think with this device, there are so many different possibilities. So and it makes sense too with the price point, just because of the different materials that they used and all of the different features. It's going to be an interesting. I feel like it's going to be an interesting sell for most people because it's very like complex. I feel like to really understand what the Vision Pro is, you need to go down to like an Apple store and kind of do 100%. That demo.
That's why I want to do the demo. But I also feel that, based on my time, for example, reviewing cars, even a demo is not going to give it justice, right? Like, so ideally, it'd be great if Apple had a program like T-Mobile back in the day did the thing, their first Un-carrier event. Like, we're talking about almost a decade ago when John Ledger was still running the show, where they had us all come to Seattle to an auditorium and did the big first, Un-carrier, like, we're gonna, things like unlimited data is free and tethering is free and you can roam and we can give you Wi-Fi on flights, all that stuff that we take for granted now with T-Mo. A lot of that stuff was announced at that event. But one of the big things, the thing they really felt like was the most important announcement was you can borrow or take home an iPhone for $0 with a T-Mobile SIM in it and experience it for a month. If you return it within that month, we will not ask you a single question and not charge you a single dollar. Wow, that's what awesome. Apple needs to do.
I agree,
Apple needs to let me even spend money, like $100 for a week or whatever it might be. And I know that's a tough thing, right? Of course, there'd be a security deposit, like, of some kind if you don't return it. I think with T-Mobile, there was something like that too, right? That's not the point. The point is we need people to be able to play with this thing for a longer amount of time. And I don't know if they can do anything about that.
Right. I totally agree with you because I feel like you don't really get the full experience until, you're in your space and trying it for yourself and kind of seeing, how would this work in my daily life? Like, what could I use this for each day to kind of help with productivity or using this for entertainment? Like, what are the use cases? So I definitely agree with you on that part as well.
So, like we've talked already about, obviously, the kind of, you pin a bunch of windows in your place. We've talked about, and then to be clear, these can be spatial OS apps, they can be iPad apps, they can be entertainment like a music player, or they can be like a video, like a TV. It's a virtual TV basically, like Netflix not available, but like say Apple TV Plus or something, right? They can even be a web browser running Netflix, right? So the question to you is, like, seems to me like this is another kind of vertical that they have here, right? Another thing is a bunch of 2D windows in your 3D space that are persistent, as you said, from session to session, and let you be productive, right? And let you do things like Twitter and Insta and, your Reddit threads and your YouTube, analytics and all the things you do, your email, whatever, right? And of course, you can pair a Bluetooth keyboard to the device to use that, or you can use a virtual keyboard. How is the virtual keyboard?
So I have some mixed opinions on the virtual keyboard. So it's when you go to type something, the virtual keyboard just shows up right in front of you. So when I saw this for the first time, I was like, this is crazy. Because when you type on the keyboard, like you can just press and it responds. Another option, you can use dictation, or you can just look at each letter and then pinch to select. So for me, I found that the quickest was to just like actually type on the keyboard, or just using dictation. It definitely took a little bit to get used to because I just felt like it was awkward to just be like typing on the air.
I bet it's like, the first time we typed on glass, right? I don't know if you had that experience because, perhaps you never really had to play with a BlackBerry or, a T9
My dad
keyboard
used to have
on a
one,
dumb
so
phone
I used to use his BlackBerry Bold.
You did? Okay. So I feel like, that's, to me, I would definitely want a pair. If I was in my home, I would want a pair of Bluetooth keyboard. And then maybe when I'm like in the other room, and I don't want to run back to my office or something, I'd use the virtual on-air keyboard. But the point I'm making is that there's another whole thing here with pairing it to your Mac, right? So to me, that seems like the most exciting experience because like right now, here I am traveling. I'm in Buenos Aires, Argentina, because I'm heading to Antarctica. Oh my God. Trip of a lifetime. And I am in front of my MacBook Air 13. Great workhorse, does all of the job on a go, it's lightweight. I love it. But sometimes, not right this moment, but sometimes it'd be nice to have, a 30-inch screen in front of me. And that's where I think Vision Pro delivers another pillar basically in that experience. You've got that, you got that entertainment experience where you're watching 3D movies or even 4K or HBO or whatever, the theater experience, where you immerse yourself. You've got that experience of all the apps that are native or iPad, and then you have the experience of the Mac mirroring. which I think is a very valid experience. But to me, what seems to be less of an emphasis for Apple, and you correct me if I'm wrong, because maybe I just haven't read about it enough on other people or seen people's YouTube videos about it, but it's like on Quest, you have all these games. You have like Beat Saber, and you have like, workout apps, and you have like actual AR games where they pin the universe in your room. Now, you can't leave your room unlike Vision Pro, but you can in that room kind of have this, what I feel is what I was expecting, that maybe one day I can do with my glasses, like put the Monopoly game in front of me. Everybody's wearing glasses. We don't really need a Monopoly game, but we're still having that kind of communal experience, right?
Right.
Are they doing anything like this? I mean, other than the dinosaur demo, or do you think that they're working on it? It's just early days?
Yeah. So the way apps are kind of set up right now, I believe there's around like 600 apps that are currently optimized for Vision Pro. There are over 1 million apps that are available, but these are just apps that are ported over from iPad or iPhone.
Yeah.
So they're not going to be
apps,
kind of
basically.
native.
Right.
But some of the apps I have tried that are native to Vision Pro are incredible. One of them is the DJ app. And basically when you're there, you can, you could be in your room, or you can just be in like a desert or on top of the moon. And
can
the
you be in front of a
turntables
giant crowd at Burning Man?
Almost like you're in a desert. It's kind of like you're DJing in front of an entire venue. But so it was a little crazy when I first tried it, but the turntables show up right in front of you. All of the vinyl album covers from your recently played on Apple Music are to the side of you. And you can just reach over, pinch one, and drag it right and drop it right on the turntable. And the song starts to play.
So cool.
I had a lot of fun with that when I tried it for the first time. But I think it's still really early for apps. I think as time goes on, we'll see more and more of these native app experiences coming to Vision Pro. So I'm excited to see, what comes next with that.
Yeah, I feel like, when the App Store came online, like basically became available to iPhone users was, 2008, right? It's not like right away, first of all. And secondly, you need the developers just got their headsets. They need to develop, right? So let's have them do stuff. We already have a third-party YouTube app, which I think is super exciting.
Yes, it's incredible.
So I think it's happening, but I feel the same. For me, that's also another turning point. The form factor needs to improve, but I feel that the ecosystem needs to improve, because here's the thing, right? Like some of these experiences you're talking about, and I think this is what makes Vision Pro so different than, say, Quest, is that you have an ecosystem with Apple, right? The fact that your Mac becomes, an extension, or rather than that the Vision Pro becomes an accessory, a very expensive accessory for your Mac, right? The fact that you can actually, see your music library in that DJ app, like that is Apple at its finest, right? That beautiful ecosystem. Because I think without the ecosystem, you kind of go back to what Quest has. It's basically a bunch of apps, right? And they're by themselves really great. And I think for $500, Quest 3 is a great product, but you need the ecosystem to make it go, right? And everybody that doesn't see that, as part of a major pillar in the Vision Pro experience, I think is missing out on something that is critical. But to me, the area that I'm the most kind of iffy about, and you talked about your persona earlier and like how that's beta, and of course it's going to improve. But my question is this, like beyond the persona gets used for obviously FaceTime calls and virtual calls anyway, because you can't have a camera sitting in front of you. But hear me out. What if you could just set up your iPhone on a tripod in front of you and do a call like that and actually have a video of you, rather than, especially when the form factor starts looking more like glasses, rather than this fake made up thing. Like, I mean, it's not made up. It's a scan of your face. And it's, for the technology we have today, a very solid first try. But I feel like that to me makes more sense. And if you think of it that way, think of the continuity kind of idea where cameras that already exist in your space can be in the Apple ecosystem used by, in your VR or AR conversations, or in your spatial computing conversations. It might make more sense than a persona. And then conversely, the persona is also there to give you that feeling of connection, right? Like the outside display that has the lenticular stuff and shows a 3D view of your eyes. And from everything I've seen, both videos, photos, written reviews, that is also very janky right now. Like half the time you can't really see the face, the quality is low. Like, yet Apple spent a lot of R&D both on hardware and software to create this display, to create this experience. It seems to me like for a version 1 product, they should have foregone all of that. They should be like the Quest, like maybe better materials, build quality, all the stuff we expect from Apple, but no display and just lighter because of it. Maybe integrated battery, and then maybe instead of $3,500, it would be like, $1,500, right? And to me, that seems like a more logical choice. I feel like they aimed for something that was a bit maybe of more of a vanity project here. Like, do you think, now that you've used it, because this is where I have a bad point of reference, because do you feel that this is an important part? Do you think that they're heading the right way? Or do you think we should just wait for them to be able to make it more practical like this?
So I think that the personas are definitely weird. Like the first time I made a FaceTime call and I called 2 of my friends when we were all wearing the Vision Pro. Mm-hmm. It took a second to get used to, because I know what they look like in real life, but then when you see the persona, you're like, oh, like, what is this? And I think kind of the whole, thing with personas is they wanted to replicate, the human emotion. Like you can, as you lift your eyes or close your eyes, like it mimics all of that. If you have your hands up, it does that. But after a few minutes on the call, I did kind of get used to it, and it didn't feel super, super unnatural. Now, the only thing is with that, when you call somebody who's not wearing a Vision Pro and, they're just on their phone or whatever, that's when the other person has been like, oh, like, what the heck is this? Like, where are you? Because that's happened to me a few times. I also called some friends who weren't wearing Vision Pro and just on their iPhone, and they were like, you look like a ghost right now, or
right.
So I definitely think there's still some work to be done with personas. And then to your point, like perhaps using, another camera that you have in the Apple ecosystem, whether it's on your iPhone or your iPad, to kind of just have set up in front of you. That could also be an angle that they could, approach it from. But I
get it. If you're walking down the street, that's not going to work, right? But do you really want to walk down the street while having a FaceTime call where the virtual window could potentially distract you from something significant? Like people talk on their phone FaceTime while walking, and that's dangerous already in some ways. But at least, it's a really small screen in front of you. You still can potentially see what's coming. But if you put a 50-inch FaceTime screen in front of you, 4 feet in front of you while you're walking, I feel like you're in deeper trouble. So to me, like, it made more sense that maybe, like a high resolution camera at the back of the iPhone, you place it on a tripod 4 feet away from you. It can do the pan and scan as you move around a little bit.
The center stage,
like
yes.
Center stage, right? Like imagine that as a continuity feature. I think that should be an option. And I feel like I understand what they're trying to do with the display and the connection, but I feel like what we saw in the ads, the dads playing with his kids wearing the headset, I don't think that's reality. Like, I feel like we should treat this more like this is a tool that I wear at home that lets me basically be more productive, because now I do not have the constraint of screens, physical screens. Yeah. All right. And to me, that's very powerful. Do we need to go beyond that until we can create something that's more like a normal pair of glasses, like a Ray-Ban Meta system, where you can see people through, unless they're wearing sunglasses, like you can see their eyes, then you don't have to even worry about that anymore. So I feel like they're developing all this technology for something that might not be A, necessary yet, and B, if it is necessary, could eventually be a better experience with regular glasses once the technology gets to that. So that's why I'm not convinced, especially, when you see the price tag. And also, I've seen the video, you took the subway, I've seen a bunch of other people do fun stuff. I hear that it's hard to get, and maybe you can clarify this because we couldn't figure that out, Parker and I. Like, apparently you can't pin objects in the subway because they move away from you. Like, isn't there a way to tell it to use the point of reference of the vehicle you're in? Like if you're on an airplane, clearly it's got to stay in front of you. You can't have it fly
Yes.
backwards at 400 miles an hour. So how does that work? Is there a setting for that or something?
Yes. So there is a travel mode built into Vision Pro, which essentially just stabilizes all of the visuals so that when you're in a moving vehicle or on the plane, the windows aren't kind of going all over the place.
Got it.
And it does work pretty well. One thing I also will say about just regarding spatial video is I just agree with you on the part that, like, if I'm at a birthday party, like, I don't necessarily see myself wearing the Vision Pro to capture spatial video. Like, instead I would, record a spatial video on my iPhone.
iPhone.
Pro,
yeah, right. Yeah.
and then play it back on the Vision Pro. Like, I could see myself doing that. And as you're, I don't know if it's like recommended to, walk through streets and stuff, but I did try that out. And basically what happens is I took it out in Boston on Monday, and if you have your apps open and then you just continue walking, you basically just walk right through your home screen and then the apps disappear. So anytime, like, I don't know if you can have like a persistent window kind of going while you're, just walking. So,
but if you're in a cab or a subway or a airplane, you can pin it, right? Like there's a way to kind of say, stay with this vehicle, basically.
Right. I have yet to try it in a car. I was a little like hesitant, well, obviously not driving, but like in the passenger seat, but I was a little hesitant to, try that, but
yeah,
we'll
I mean,
see.
Unless you have a friend who drives you right now, I think that'd probably be the best way to go, because you don't have to worry about, some weird interaction with the crazy New York cab driver, right?
Right.
So, yeah. But I'm actually fascinated by this. To me, like, if it was a better form factor, one where I didn't feel so claustrophobic and have all these issues with my prescription and the weight and the fogging up and all that, like once they perfect that, and, to me, just the productivity aspects of 2D windows alone is very appealing. The ability to do the movie theater thing, even if eventually, you can't completely darken things out, but it's still bright enough that you can project a screen in front of you within the field of view of the device to watch like 3D HDR 4K video.
Right.
That stuff has got me excited. My Mac having a display, that's exciting. And of course, once the developers get at it, the actual AR, I know Apple doesn't want to use that, but real spatial apps, right? I think those are the things that I'm most keen on, but I hope they add some kind of support for an external camera, because eventually, I mean, right now it doesn't make sense because you'd be wearing Vision Pro and you'd still see that even though there is the eyesight,
right,
you'd still see, it wouldn't be a great experience to have a camera, right? But I think that once it's like, my glasses here, you talking to me, we're doing a video call right now, it's perfectly fine. So at that point, it'd be nice if the cameras that are in your, environment can be used, and maybe by having multiple cameras, like you put your MacBook over here, you put your iPhone over there, or your iPad, and then all of a sudden it's a 3D view, right? Because it's taking that and like processing it, kind of like when you get in a car and you get the 360 video view of the overhead from the car, so you can see if you're going to park and hit the curb or not, that kind of stuff. I see that being cool. But yeah, I'm intrigued, but can't justify. I mean, I could probably afford it, but I just can't justify wanting to spend that money when I know it's never going to be as comfortable an experience for me as I'd like it to be. And more importantly, it's like, I don't really have a use case for it. I think that if it was another accessory like, Apple Watches or AirPods is probably a bit simplistic because it's a much simpler device. I expect it to be more expensive than AirPods. But if it was more like $1,000 device or $500 to $1,000 device, I'd be like, I'd be all over it. I'd get that run right now just to experience it. Right.
Now, I think as time goes on, we're going to see a more products in the Vision lineup, because like on Apple's website, they have, a category just called Vision. And I have a feeling that at some point we'll just have an Apple Vision, which would be a scaled down version of the Apple Vision Pro at a much more affordable price point. Now, I don't know how much more affordable it would be, but I would just assume that, certain features might be taken out. But I do agree with you. Like the fact one of my biggest use cases I've noticed over the last couple of days is just like editing on Vision Pro. So, when you have Vision Pro on, you just look at the Mac and then the little connect window appears right above it. And the Mac screen turns into a giant, 35-inch display in front of you.
That must be amazing. Yeah.
And it's seamless on the, just using the Mac keyboard and the Mac trackpad, it, just works. So it was really cool to kind of try editing a video on that. Now I will say I feel like I can only have it on for about like 2 to 3 hours before I start getting like tired of, wearing it. And, because eventually you feel a little disconnected because you're looking at the world through a screen.
Right.
So that was one thing. And then another thing was the Apple Vision Pro also ships with 2 bands. There's a solo knit band and then a dual loop band. So the solo knit band is basically just, a singular thing that wraps around.
It looks really cool. It looks really comfy, actually.
It has a little fit dial in the back to adjust it. Now, I actually found that one wasn't very comfortable for me. When I had it on, I'm not sure if it's because I didn't have the correct light seal, but my Optic ID doesn't work when I have the solo knit band on. And it's a lot more noticeable that you're wearing the Vision Pro. Like the weight is a little more noticeable. The dual loop band really helps with that because there's a band on top. So it kind of balances the weight out a little bit more. And my Optic ID wasn't working for a whole day until I, changed the band and put on the dual loop, and then everything started working perfectly fine. So for me, I like the dual loop band better. I feel like it looks better when you have the solo knit band on, but for comfort, It's the dual loop. So
definitely, yeah. So is it heavy? Is it front heavy? Do you find, that when you say you do 2-3 hours, that's actually nice because it's about the duration of the battery, right? But my question is it because, you start, like what part do you feel is the hardest for you? Is it just pressure on your face? Is it the weight? Is it just, you want your skin to breathe fresh air? Like what is it?
So I definitely think after a couple of hours, you can notice the pressure on your face. Like when I take it off, I have a mark on my face that kind of like goes around.
I've seen photos of that online. Yeah.
It's a lot more noticeable when you have the solo knit on. Well, at least for me, it was. When I had the solo knit band on and I took it off, I had this like giant red mark on my forehead. It wasn't as noticeable with the dual loop, but another thing is with the battery, there's accessories for the battery. Like there's Belkin had made a little clip that you can have for it.
That's cool.
So I do really like that because as depending on what kind of pants you're wearing, like the battery does have some weight to it. It's not super, super noticeable once you kind of have Vision Pro on, but you can tell that it feels like you have a phone in your pocket almost.
I mean, it says it's 300 and something grams and most smartphones are 200-ish right now. So yeah.
Right. It's yeah. So it definitely is noticeable. While you're wearing Vision Pro, it's you're kind of so in awe by the visuals that I guess I'm not really paying attention by the weight. Yeah. But then after that 2 or 3 hour period, at least for me, my face started to get a little tired and I needed to take a break. And it does advise you to take frequent breaks when you're setting it up. So that is another thing I wanted to point out.
Nice. Awesome. Well, that's good. So, I feel like to me, it sounds like you wouldn't, maybe some people would because I've heard that now, but you probably wouldn't use this all day long, right? Like you would use it in chunks and maybe an hour here, 2 hours there kind of thing. And do you see yourself still using this in a month? Like, I assume so because you're having a good experience, like the editing example for your video stuff. But I would love to hear what it's like, not just this is more like an open-ended because obviously you need to use it for a month. But I'm just wondering what it's going to be like because that to me will be the telling test, right?
Right. I can still see myself using it after the month. I believe that some of the bugs that I've experienced and other people have experienced will be a little bit more ironed out with, future updates to Vision OS.
Right.
And then, as we have more apps come live that are native to Vision OS, I think that will be just even more powerful to have those more immersive experiences available on Vision Pro. I can see myself, especially like on weekends and stuff, using this to just watch movies. In the Apple TV app, there's a native theater. So any movie that you're playing. It feels like you're in a movie theater, and you can change the position that you're in the theater. Like you can be in like a front seat, a middle seat, a back seat, and then there's also an option for a balcony. So if you want to be a little bit up higher, it all just kind of, it just like moves so seamlessly. And I tried watching, I watched about like 15 minutes of a movie the other night just to try it out. And like, I feel like I want to watch all my movies on that now because it's so like immersive, and the audio is crystal clear as well.
Everybody agrees the displays are absolutely outstanding and stunning on this. And I think that, you cannot underestimate that experience. Just the theater experience, basically. Yeah. Let's switch gears and talk some more about the Vision Pro, but there's been some disassemblies out there. By iFixit, which is a bit more methodical, and then of course by Zach at Jerry Rig Everything, who tore the thing down like he always does. And so I just want to point that out to the audience. If you are like me, a tech nerd, and you're really curious as to how this thing's put together and how complex it is, I mean, any of you who have either disassembled your own phone to replace a screen, or have watched Zach do it in a destructive way, or have watched iFixit do it in a non-destructive way, compare that to the iFixit, teardown of the Vision Pro, and that thing, I can totally understand the $3,500 after looking at that. Like, right. And this is me as an electrical engineer who's worked on product. Like, I am like, wow, the level of complexity and the level of like, just the sophistication of the hardware is out of this world.
I agree. It is so incredible. After watching, the teardowns, I was also just surprised of how complex each component is. And also the fact that there was like, I just assumed that, the front glass that I was seeing was just, the glass that was acting as the screen, but then when they removed that outer panel, there's a whole nother screen underneath. So it was really interesting to see all of the different components and how everything kind of works together to create the experience on Vision Pro.
The other thing that surprised me was the IPD adjustment, like the interpupil distance, where it adjusts the screens, the lenses left to right to match the distance between your eyes. That is handled by little motors that move the lenses around. Like, that's, on some headsets, that's actually just a little wheel that you adjust by hand. Right. And that moves the lens. But Apple went through the effort of creating a automated system that adjusts to your distance between pupils. And like, that's what we expect from Apple, but at the same time, wow, right? Like, so there's some cool stuff. I highly suggest you watch both videos, folks, especially if you're the big nerds that I know you all are. So the other thing is now is a bunch of news items I want to jump into, because it's not all about Apple Vision Pro. There's a bunch of other stuff happening. Yes. But speaking of Apple, let's wrap up with them quickly. Stronger rumors of a folding phone from Apple. We're looking at a ways away here, like maybe 2026, 2027. But this is very reassuring to me, because I feel like, here's the thing. I feel like mostly I'm sold now on folding phones. It took me a while, but I am. But I feel like if Apple made a flip phone, particularly a flip phone that was an iPhone, like, I think it would sell like hotcakes. And a book style folding phone for the Pro version would also sell it quite well for those of us who have partaken in the Android world. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Do you think, first of all, that Apple's going to do it? And secondly, do you think that's prediction of the dates here, like the years, are reasonable?
Yeah, so I definitely think we know Apple's definitely been testing some sort of foldable devices over the past couple of years. And typically Apple will take its time with some, technologies like this. And then when it does come to fruition, usually they do it right. There's always like, the Apple way of doing things. And I feel like however they end up implementing this foldable phone, it will be, it will be really, really cool to have. Like, I feel like there's going to be some, native multitasking features. Maybe we'll finally get like split screens on the iPhone, which is something I've wanted for the longest time.
I mean, a lot of iPadOS stuff could carry over, honestly, on the big screen, right? On the folding book style phone. Yeah. I'm excited to see it. And a lot of the Apple Watch technology could end up on the front screen of the of the flip phone if they ever make a flip phone. So
Right.
they have all the ingredients. I just want them to do it because I know so many people that love the folding phone experience, but are iPhone users and, carry both right now. Like my spouse Theo has a Z Flip 3 and an iPhone. And, why not? Right.
Yeah.
But it's ideally
Yeah.
they just want the one. So
I typically carry around the OnePlus Open along with
that's
my
been
iPhone.
my darling for sure.
I love that phone. It is an incredible device.
So good. It's so good. It's the phone that finally convinced me of book style being a thing because I could not ever get into the Z Folds, like the vertical, narrow, tall, aspect ratio thing and the weight and the thickness, all that. Like, yeah, the OnePlus Open still in my pocket after all these months. So well done, OnePlus. Speaking of, we have the 12R finally official in the US. And I have one, and you have one. You've spent
one as well.
Very little time. I've also spent very little time. But here's the thing. I reviewed the 12 because to me that was, the one I was more interested in, but also because I feel it's the first time that OnePlus has really done a flagship that competes with Pixel and Samsung S24 and even iPhone in a long time. And in terms of value, beats them all. But the 12R, even though it's not the best they make, I think it in itself is kind of like a scaled down version of that entire review that I wrote for the 12, but just a little more affordable. And I'm super stoked about taking it for a spin a little more now that it's official.
Oh, I'm so excited. I feel like with the 12R, OnePlus has kind of gone back to its roots in having, a really solid smartphone available at a very cheap price. If you trade in, you can literally just trade in any like flip phone, like whatever, some old
any
1980s
phone on fire. That's what I like to say.
Right. And you get, the $100 off. So it'd be $399. And
$399.
That's incredible for what you're getting.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great, offer.
Even at $499, I feel like, yes, you are maybe not getting the camera performance of a Pixel 7a, but you're close. And you're definitely going to beat the Pixel 7a in every other factor, like display.
Right.
Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 is going to walk all over Tensor, storage, RAM, charging speeds. Now the 7a does have wireless charging now, which I'm a big fan of. So of course you don't get that on the 12R, but I'm willing to forgive them for $499 / realistically $399 because this offer of trade-in, which is also valid for the 12, by the way, is like with the Open, valid for the entire duration. These phones will be on sale in North America, which means, and it's a little more money in Canada. So the trade-in. So again, find a phone that's in a drawer from 20 years ago, set it on fire on your grill, make sure the fire is extinguished fully, put it in a box and trade it in for your OnePlus 12R or 12, because either phone you can't go wrong with. The way I look at the 12R, and tell me what you think there, Frank, is it's the 11 from last year. Like, look at the specs, and you gain a much better display, that 4500 nits display, slightly smaller display than the 12, but about the same size as the 11 last year. And you lose the questionable 2x telephoto from last year on the 11, but everything else is the same for $200 less.
Right.
Like, holy crap balls. Like, they nailed it, right?
They really did nail it. And one feature on the OnePlus 12 and 12R I'd like to mention is the Aqua Touch feature. They have a dedicated chip for detecting whether, it's water or your finger actually, touching the display. So if you're walking around outside while it's raining, you won't have any issues with the screen and using the phone. Like, I think that's incredible that they did that.
Yes. And, if you compare it to, like, if you look at the R, like the T version used to be in the past, because the R has existed in India for a while. And, it brought really good value. The T is what we got, but the T was like kind of like halfway value compared to the R always. And now that we're getting the R, you can see that value. I'll give you an example. The 10T had a plastic frame. This has a metal frame. The 10T didn't have the alert slider. This has the alert slider. Things like that is where I'm very confident now about OnePlus. Between the Open, the 12, and now the 12R, I'm like, okay, they're back on track. This is exactly what we expect. No corner sky, like, okay, wireless charging, but come on. Like for $399, $499,
you can't beat that.
I don't think you can beat the OnePlus 12R, and I don't think you can for $699 or $599 if you trade in, you can beat the 12. To me, it's like, if I wasn't Stockholm syndrome addicted to the Pixel software, like all the call, wait for me stuff, I would be on a OnePlus 12 right now, 100%, because
it
is like, there were times when I'd question it, but now that OnePlus has shown they can do cameras properly with the Open, and the 12 has almost the same camera system, like, you can't go wrong. Like, you can take photos with that thing that are incredible. So the 12R, hopefully camera-wise, lives up to that as well to some extent. We'll see.
Sure. I'm really happy with the OnePlus lineup right now. I feel like you really can't go wrong with any of the options. They have, the 12R, the 12, and the Open. Like, there's something at all different price points and different form factors as well. So I'm really pleased with the way the lineup is right now. And, I feel like they've really been nailing their phones over the last year. So
yeah, and I also think, that if you look at it, like the N series, the Nord that they're going to come out with next, is going to add that third tier. Like, like the N30 last year was pretty solid for the money. So I think that the N40 this year, or whatever it is called, is going to be also pretty hot. So speaking of BBK Group, I don't know how familiar you are, Frank, with the saga that is the Vivo V series, because OMG, Vivo literally releases a new Vivo V series every 3 months. It's like last year we got the 28 and the 29 series. And now we have the 30 series that just got announced. And I will guarantee you we will get a 31 sometime in July. And then we'll get a 32 in November. Like, this is how they're insane. For a long time, I thought
it's
Oppo
crazy.
was insane because Oppo had the monopoly on launching 2 phones a year with the Reno series. You would literally get 2 Renos a year, but I think Vivo has finally told, Oppo, screw you, we can one-up you, hold my beer, we'll make 3 phones a year on the V series. That's the takeaway. That's why I can't ignore this phone, because there's going to be a whole bunch of people all over the world, especially in Southeast Asia and in India and in markets like, Europe, that are going to end up with this phone in their pocket. So, you saw the specs. I mean, Snapdragon 7 Gen 3, that's not too shabby. It's got an AMOLED 120 hertz, but the resolution is interesting. It's between 1080p and 1440p. It's a 1200 something resolution.
Yes, I did see that.
2800 nits on a phone that's a mid-ranger. Holy crap.
It's crazy. That's crazy. Like, I can just imagine using that outside and like having no issue even being in direct sunlight.
I know. And then
it's crazy.
Then they put 250 megapixels in there. And it's like, for the rear, that one has an omnivision sensor. That's the main sensor. And then they have a 50 megapixel ultra wide with autofocus, which you don't see that on a mid range. And autofocus means you can do macro. Okay. And then it says OIS on it. So like, to me, that means the main sensor is OIS. That's all you need, really. Like, a telephoto would round things up, but it's a mid-range phone. What do you want? Okay. Oh, and 50 megapixel on the front, because Vivo has always been the king and the queen, or whatever, the champion of selfies. Okay. So,
And let's also mention that 5,000 milliamp hour battery.
Oh my God.
Like, that is amazing. Like,
and
I need that on my
80-watt
iPhone.
charging, which, by the way, is the same as Super VOOC. It's just called something different because, BBK Group. And look at that thing. It looks sexy. It
really does. I love the colors.
Those colors. I mean, it does have a bit of that OnePlus 12 kitchen counter vibe that I'm not too keen on.
It looks a little
some
marbly
of those models,
kind of.
But yeah. Look, folks, if you're a Vivo fan and you can't afford the X series, which is their flagships, which are absolutely baller awesome, this is your phone. But move fast, because if you don't buy it now, there'll be a V31 in 3 months. So,
now's the time, guys.
Now's the time. Oh, Vivo, they crack me up. We talked last week about this a little bit, the Xiaomi 14 series going global.
Yes.
And there was, of course, a rumor last week that it would come during MWC. Well, guess what? It's been confirmed. We now have an official launch date of February 25th, which is smack dab in the middle of the conference. And so like you don't have to think too hard here to figure out what's going to happen. We're going to get a 14 and a 14 Pro, and there's rumors of 14 Ultra is showing up, and I can't wait for that. How do you feel about the Xiaomi 14 series?
I'm interested to see kind of what they bring to the lineup. I did see that rumor about the Xiaomi 14 Ultra, and, I don't know what that, could entail. Like, is that, an upgraded camera? There's an additional camera on the Ultra, but I'm interested to see especially how the cameras look, because I know it's expected to have 4 50 megapixel lenses. So it will be interesting to see what kind of comes out with this device, and then the different models that they release as well, because we could have the 14 Pro and then the 14 Ultra, so we'll kind of and be interesting to see the differences there, and then also the price points as well.
Well, so from what I gather, and this is not secret stuff, this is like what we already know. The 14 series came out in China already, like in December.
Yep.
So there's a 14 and a 14 Pro. I think we're only going to get the 14 and the new Ultra. The Ultra, of course, is a complete unknown at this point, other than the rumors.
Right.
So I'm not sure if we're getting a 14 Pro at all, but let's see how it goes. And this is global, right? When I say us, I mean not North America, obviously, but the rest of the world that's not in China.
Right.
And based on the 13 Ultra last year, I think that the Oppo Find X7 Ultra, which I have right now, which I'm taking to Antarctica to review. Talk about the headline of this review. I tested the Oppo Find X7 Ultra camera in Antarctica. Like,
oh my gosh.
Of course you do that, right?
Of course you do. Of course.
To me, the 14 Ultra is going to be smack dab competing with that. 4 50 megapixel sensors, check. 1-inch Litia sensor for the main sensor, check. Will we get 2 telephotos that are periscopes? Probably, check. And so then it's like a matter of color science. Do you prefer Leica or do you prefer Hasselblad, right? And there might be some other variations. If the 14 Pro is available with a titanium frame in China, I would be very surprised if the 14 Ultra didn't have titanium as well, or something.
I think it will have
fancy,
titanium,
right?
Something. Yeah, it's going to be some high-end premium material. So.
For sure. And then, there'll be a whole slew of accessories, a tablet, a smartwatch. I mean, I'm making that up because I just know from past MWCs. Like last year, they sent me the 13 and the 13 Pro ahead of MWC under embargo. And then at MWC, I was like, what do you mean there's a tablet? What do you mean there's a smartwatch? What do you mean there's like a pair of earbuds? Like, why didn't you send me PR on that? You already have me on the embargo. Like,
devices everywhere.
I'm not complaining because I love the Xiaomi phones, and they send me almost everything. I get like a Xiaomi or a Poco or a Redmi phone every month, and it's like Christmas. I'm like, oh, this one's cool. Like, it's 3 months ago they sent me their $120 phone from Poco, and I was like, oh. Well, I don't know if that's really important to me, but then I played with it. I was like, hey, let's put my SIM in there and just use it for a day or two. And I was like,
yeah, why not?
Holy crap, that is $120 and it doesn't suck. Like, how the hell do you make a phone for $120 and I can actually use it day to day? Like,
it's crazy.
I love China because of that. It's like, oh, you want a phone? $50 and we'll make a good phone for you. Like, yes.
Yeah.
Because I want everyone to be able to have a good phone experience.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Now, the last bit of MWC related news is that the Nothing Phone 2A, which is supposedly maybe arriving at MWC, is leaking. And did you see that design? If that's actually true, this is a rumor right now. Like, I kind of dig it. It's very teenage engineering, isn't it?
It looks so cool. Like the back of that device and being able to see kind of that like transparent design is really kind of what sold me on Nothing products in the past.
Phone 2 was such a great phone, wasn't it?
Oh my gosh, it really was.
Yeah. So this looks hot to me. It kind of reminds me of that kind of jog dial thing on the top third of that very expensive voice recorder thing that they have, that Michael Fisher has reviewed.
Yes.
That thing is, teenage engineering all over it. Look, I love it when CalPay disrupts and when CalPay comes along and says, well, we don't know yet, but supposedly is going to bring us a mid-range phone. Remember, this is the guy who made the OnePlus Nord a thing. And Yes, that's a few years back now. That's 2020, technically. The height of COVID, we got the OnePlus Nord and I got a review unit. And I was like, oh my God, OnePlus is back. Because
Yeah.
he made a phone that was so affordable, but so good, that cut so few corners. And
Right.
at the time, I was like, finally, they're back. But then he left, and basically all good ideas ended up in nothing, which actually is a good thing. I'm not complaining. But
It's a great
for
device.
a while there, OnePlus got confused, right? Because, well, what do we do now? Carl's gone, kind of thing. And then they found their backing, and they're back in business. And I love it because now we both have Carl's little baby, nothing, and OnePlus, Pete Lau doing, finally listening to, I think, the West and bringing the OnePlus phones we want. So this is an
Yes, I
exciting
agree.
time for those of you who are longtime OnePlus / nothing fans, right?
This is such an exciting time, and we're getting, so many different devices now, and it's just so exciting to see all of this new tech come to the market and seeing the advances each year in these different smartphones. So I'm really excited to see, what comes with the Phone 2A, and because it's interesting that we've already seen some leaks of it and it hasn't even been announced yet. So
Yeah, right. Well, that's how it goes.
Right.
How do you feel about the Samsung Galaxy S24 series cameras?
So I have been loving it. I haven't really I haven't really experienced any sort of issues with my camera. Now I back in right after Unpacked, I had spent about 5 days testing out the camera, most importantly like the ultra wide lens, and then I also wanted to do some of like the zooming as well because I feel like it's important to test portraits in 5x and see how they all kind of compare. I really was impressed with the way the 5x portraits came out.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that had to be tested in these, right? Like that's the thing about, like when you get a phone this complex, it's not an easy task to review it, right? In terms of imaging. So, but my feeling, I have an S24 Ultra. I can't speak for the S24 and S24 Plus, but I feel like the S24 Ultra in terms of camera delivers a very good camera experience. But once you start comparing it to other phones, like its predecessor, S23 Ultra, or, the Oppo Find X7 Ultra, or even the OnePlus 12, or like, let's see, Pixel 8 Pro, it doesn't quite hold up. Like I can't put my finger on exactly what it is, but it feels like it needs more fine tuning. And even in respect to the S23 Ultra. Now, there's no doubt that the 5x telephoto with 50 megapixels is better. I think overall it gives us more choices, especially in between 3 and 10x. But I feel like in terms of tuning, it's just lacking a little bit. And so there's been rumors on and off, they came, they went, and now they're back on, which is why I put this story in here, that there is a camera update coming because I feel like one more year has gone by. There's all these new AI features. The phones are being polished and improved. It's very iterative, but it's still very solid. Like I think the hardware is great. And the software is also really solid. Some of the AI features are really cool. But I think that it didn't quite deliver the punch that we were expecting. And maybe this will fix it in terms of imaging. We'll see.
I agree. Because I took a couple of shots. Like I took the same image on a OnePlus 12, a Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra, and then on my iPhone 15 Pro Max. And you could notice the differences, although they were, subtle in a couple of cases. But I think, to your point, just with this update that is, rumored to be coming, that it will kind of put in more of that fine tuning. And I'm not exactly sure like what will be done, update wise, but I think as time goes on, we'll see improvements in the imaging on the Ultra. So,
yeah, and I mean, this is nothing new. Remember when the S20 Ultra came out, and initially there were a lot of little growing pains with autofocus stuff. So I think I'm not worried here. I just feel like these rumors exist not because we're trying to be picky here. These rumors exist because I think there's a real need for a slight improvement, and
I agree,
especially because the competition is fierce right now, and I think
it really is.
Samsung learned it with the Z Fold and the OnePlus Open, which is also known as the Oppo Find N3. Like you can't you can't be complacent anymore. You really have to deliver.
Right.
Like if you're coming from an S20 Ultra or S21 Ultra, of course the S24 Ultra is going to blow you away. And of course, most of you, that's what you're going to happen, right? But the reality is you and me, we get all the phones. So it's like we can play with it and we can objectively tell you, like, rank them in terms of camera. Now, Does it matter day to day? Probably not hugely. But I would like to think that if I'm spending $12.99 on an Ultra right now, that I'd better get myself one of the top 3 cameras in the world. Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. No, so, for that price point, like you'd expect a very, very solid camera, and that's like the best. Like and like you said, in that top 3. So.
100%. Well, listen, Frank, we should wrap up. Do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet? All your various social media handles, of course, your channels and everything. Tell everybody about you.
Yes. So I've been making tech videos on social media since 2019 now. I started when I was a freshman in college, and I've been going ever since. And now I'm doing this full time. So I'm super excited. You can find me anywhere: TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, at Frank McShan, MCSHAN.
Awesome. So folks, don't forget to subscribe to Frank's channels. Follow him. This is awesome content. So just go out there and get it. And you know where to find me on the internet, folks. I'm at Tankgirl. That's TNKGR. I like the comic book character. Just drop all the vowels. You get my handle on Twitter, on Blue Sky, if you're there, on Insta, on Threads, where I'm very active. So check it out. And if you want to chat with me and Frank, you can find us on these. Then, of course, the podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on all the major platforms: Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, everywhere good podcasts could be found. So please subscribe. Tell your friends, rate and review the show if you can. The YouTube channel lives at youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast. So like, subscribe, tell your friends, click the bell. You know how YouTube works. Do the thing, comment. And folks, if you want to help me out, there's a Patreon, patreon.com/tankgirl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. If you want to see me and Frank chat in person or my future guests, join the Patreon. There's a tier there to get a video version of the show like a day or 2 in advance, and it's pretty reasonably priced, and you get to see us hold phones and be more with us. So consider that. Look at the Patreon, and if you don't want to use Patreon, that's cool. There's a PayPal link in the show notes. You can click through and buy me a coffee. I'm drinking a Coke today, but that's unusual for me. Mostly it's coffee. My whole life is coffee. So help me out if you can. And of course, I want to thank our sponsor, Clicks. Clicks Technology Limited is a UK-based mobile company building innovative tactile tools to enhance the modern smartphone experience. Founded by an expert team of creators and technologists with decades of experience at some of the world's most well-known mobile brands, Clicks designs and develops mobile keyboards as instruments for creation. For more information on Clicks, visit clicks.tech. And I want to thank you, Frank, for being my guest. Thanks so much for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, thanks so much, Marian, for having me. This was so much fun.
Absolutely. We'll have you on the show at some point in the future. And folks, we will have another show next week, so stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.